Hi, folks. Recently, I had the opportunity to be on a Zoom call with, I think there are about 40 other coaches on there, and the legendary Dr. Jack Daniels, who wrote a book that I'm guessing a lot of you are familiar with called Daniels' Running Formula. And I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about some of the principles in Jack's book, since it's really all fresh in my mind, having just been with the Zoom call with him. Because a lot of people, I think, have read the book and they usually say, boy, it's really confusing. I don't know that I understood it. I think it's confusing because he refers to an E pace, a T pace, and things like that. But really, once you understand those, I think it's a fairly straightforward book. And it's a great book. He's got great credentials behind him. Like anything else in running, he's got some things that he believes that other people don't necessarily believe the same thing. But I'm going to go with what Jack is believing because I think he's got a lot of credibility. And heck, I was just on that Zoom call. So one of the first main principles that he has is that you should always do the least amount of work for the most amount of benefit. In other words, he says there's no point in working any harder than you need to get the benefit that we want, because working harder is, you're just working harder, but you don't get any additional benefit. And what he means by that is whenever you're running, you're looking for some type of a physiological adaptation. You're looking to improve something physiologically in your body. Not every run improves it. Some is going to help make sure that you don't lose what you already have or maintain. But generally, there's a physiological adaptation we want to have to do that. So when he says every different type of pace that you have in there is for a specific adaptation, and there's no point in running any harder than that because you get no additional benefit from that. And if you run too hard, then there's a chance that on some future run, you won't be able to do it hard enough, and now you don't get the right adaptation because you weren't able to work hard enough for the right adaptation. So I'm going to use an example using myself. He's got a calculator called the VDOT calculator, VDOT. It's actually V.O2 calculator. And I plugged in my times to say, what would he suggest that I be running at? And he would suggest for my E pace, which is easy pace, that I would be between 9:15 and 8:24. My M pace, which he calls marathon pace, is 7:25. T pace is 6:59. That is threshold pace, lactate threshold. I pace for doing your intervals, 6:25. And R pace, repetition pace, is 6:01. Now, I should note that all of these paces are actually efforts. It's not really the pace that's the important, it's the effort. And I've done numerous videos on why effort is important. If you have the VDOT calculator, you can adjust for altitude. You can adjust for temperature. Oddly, he doesn't have an adjustment in there for humidity. I'm not sure why. I probably should have asked that question because humidity clearly matters. But if you're on hills, that's going to matter. So what he's saying is these are your paces in good conditions, at good elevation, rested, flat, and things like that. But if it's going to be hilly, if there's a lot of wind, if it's humid, hot, then of course you adjust those paces to get to the right effort. So again, you shouldn't be fixated on the pace, you should be fixated on that type of an effort. But let's get back into it. So my E pace, my easy pace, he says is 9:15 to 8:24. And my M pace, marathon pace, he says is 7:25. Now, in case I forget to mention that M pace is he's predicting what type of a pace I would have for a marathon, properly trained, good day, good course, etc. I will tell you, I have never been close to 7:25 for a marathon for all kinds of reasons. So that's really not a good M pace for me. Maybe I don't have enough slow twitch fibers. I don't know what it is. So I would actually want to have a slightly different M pace, but I'll get to that in a minute. But what if I said, well, you know what? I'm feeling really good. I'm going to run out. I'm going to do this 10-mile easy run at 7:45. Because let's face it, marathon pace is still in your aerobic zone. It's all aerobic work. That's the physiological change we're looking for. So why not run at 7:45? That goes back to you want to do the least amount of work for the most amount of benefit. So Jack would say, well, you can run 7:45 if you want, but you will get no additional physiological benefit than running in that 9:15 to 8:24 range. So you should just stick up there because do the least amount of work for the most amount of benefit. Now, there is another kind of a caveat with that. You should always be able to answer the question, what is the purpose of this workout? So most of your aerobic work, your slower running, is for that aerobic adaptation. Now remember I mentioned the marathon pace and 7:25, that really isn't right for me. It should be something different. If you look in Jack's book, and he's got some marathon plans in there, you will see that he has people doing a fair amount of running at marathon pace. But if you also look in the book, he will tell you there is no additional physiological benefit to running at marathon pace versus just running at an easy pace. So then if he's all about the least amount of work for the most amount of benefit, then why would you do that? He puts that in there specifically to give people confidence at being able to run that pace, so then they get to the marathon, they've got a confidence that they can do that. So that's why that is in there. So then that goes back to 9:15 to 8:24, 7:25. The M pace is there not for a physiological reason. It's there for a mental reason, and mental can be important as well. But that also means, since I've never come close to 7:25, I'm going to say 7:45 on a great day is probably the best that I would do in a marathon. If I wanted to do some M pace running, if I wanted to gain more confidence in being able to run, 7:25 wouldn't be the right pace for me. It'd be more like 7:45, because that's more realistically what it is that I'm going to be able to do. So it's the least amount of work for the most amount of benefit, but you do some running for a mental benefit, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, another question, and this came up on the call as well, is, well, can you run E-pace too slow? So going back to mine, again, good conditions outside, everything's fine. He's suggesting, I think it was the 9:15 to 8:24. Well, what if I felt like running 9:30 or 9:45 that day? Do I lose anything from that? And the answer is probably not. In general, you actually can't do easy too slow unless you begin to compromise your mechanics. There's a point in time where you're not running so much as plodding, and you don't ever want to be doing running where you're sacrificing mechanics. You just start reinforcing bad things. The example that Jack uses with people is that, running, you should be light on your feet. He asks people to envision that they're running over a field of eggs, and their goal is not to break any because they're very light on their feet. He says as long as they're able to do that, you really can't run too slow. But if you get to the point where you're plodding and you're smashing and you're breaking the eggs, then your mechanics have broken down, and you should probably kind of pick that pace up. So I'll try to get into some more of his paces and his philosophies, maybe in a couple other videos. But if you haven't read the book, it is a really good book. I think the big thing is to realize when you see his workouts and it's like, 5 miles at E pace plus 2 miles at T pace, just realizing he's saying, here's your easy pace, here's your threshold pace. And I think that makes it a lot easier to understand, because I think the guy has done some tremendous things, and he's a good person to follow to learn a little bit more about running.